Numa, the Swamp of Death, is a map that I might compare to that of a music artist who just discovered a new sound, or perhaps an entrepreneur with a new business idea. There is an age-old mantra which says the early bird gets the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese. That is to say, it's not always the first to an idea that is able to make the most of it, but rather the second, who is able to learn off of the shortcomings of the first and consolidate on those failures. Numa is sadly stuck in history as the first mouse. I ran a poll last week on Twitter asking my followers to vote on their least favorite World at War zombie maps, and to my surprise, Numa was unanimously voted as the most disliked map. This came as a surprise because as someone who has played World at War since its release, I had expected that it would sit behind Reese, but ahead of Noct and Verrückt. See, that's because of the 4 World at War maps, Numa is the second most advanced, the largest in size, and introduced not only the first ever unique wonder weapon, but it also introduced the 4 original characters. On top of that, it was the birthplace of training, so by virtue, it created the most fundamental strategy of the entire series. In a lot of ways, you might even be able to argue that Numa was more innovative and influential than Doris itself. So, with all that in mind, how is it that a map which did all this can go on to be so condemned by the community? Hey! What's up? Welcome back to Zombies Retrospective, a weekly series in which we do a deep dive analysis on an old COD Zombies map. If you missed the previous 2 episodes, you can feel free to jump in right here, but I do recommend watching them if you like your stories complete. There'll be links down in the description to check out the full series. So in this episode, we will be analyzing the gameplay, innovation, and atmosphere to determine why people hold Numa in such a low regard. And we will also judge whether those negative claims are truly justified. With all that said though, let's get into it. One of the most notable changes of Numa is its shift in overall tone. In the first 2 World at War Zombies maps, Noct and Verrückt rely almost entirely on visual and audio inputs to create the world. The external atmospheres are the most dominant feature of those 2 maps, and they work to make us feel the way that we feel. Because of this, the internal experience is left to the player to create their own subjective one. This plays an integral part in the very real suspense we feel in those maps. We create the fear within ourselves. But for the first time in Numa, things change.
We're here. This is the place.
Finally, I was getting tired of Takio's rambling.
Shut up, Nikolai, and get your gear up.
Hank Dempsey, Nikolai Belinsky, Takio Masaki, and Edward Richthofen make their debut to Call of Duty Zombies in Numa, and these 4 unique playable characters change everything. With the introduction of these 4 characters, the game is now able to affect how we perceive the map on the terms of the game developers. By taking the player inward through a character, they influence how we should be feeling in that experience. Instead of a raw feed of information from gameplay to us, the experience is put through the filter of the POV of a character. These characters are used as a tool to project how the game developer wants the player to feel. By doing this, the game is able to take the tone in any direction it wants, and boy, do things change. I want you to think about the somber tones of Nocturne Toten, and now look forward to the badass mayhem of Black Ops 1 Zombies. Despite them being from the same game developer, Noct feels on another planet compared to anything from Black Ops 1. The transition that takes place most notably starts though on Numa with the use of these 4 characters. The first 2 Zombies maps are unequivocally in the horror genre. Numa, however, creates engrossing characters who are completely unafraid of the zombies, and this flips the game on its head. No longer does this feel so much like an intense fight for our lives, but rather an almost enjoyable killing spree. We are no longer the victim, but perhaps maybe something closer to an adversary or even a predator. And not only are our characters unafraid, but in fact they are almost casual. Nikolai, for example, is more concerned about vodka than his actual life, and it brings a comical tone to the morally justified slaughter.
Stay away from my vodka!
More than anything, however, our characters work towards amplifying the gameplay. In Nacht and Verrückt, the gameplay is what makes you feel claustrophobic and instills fear inside of you. In this case, it's the gameplay which sets the tone of the map. Numa, by contrast, is the opposite. By using these ridiculous characters as a filter to tell you how to feel, this uses the tone to tell the player how the game should be played. The crude, uncensored, and completely over-the-top monologues tell you, kill zombies, be a badass, and if anything else, stay away from that Russian dude's vodka. So instead of the gameplay influencing the tone influences the gameplay, and this is the first time in Zombies that we see this take place. But telling a player to be a badass is one thing, and giving them the tools to do so is another. On Verrückt, the Marines do partially lean into a quote, badass mentality, but it feels lost in part due to the fact that the player simply can't do that. The map is too hard. On Numa, the player is given an upgrade to ensure carnage, the Wunderwaffe DG2. The Wunderwaffe. A weapon that harnesses the power of lightning and 115 to electrify the hordes. While officially it's the second wonder weapon of Zombies, this is the first weapon we see in Zombies that truly empowers the player. The ray gun, while powerful, only feels like a beta test weapon in comparison to the mighty Wunderwaffe. On top of things, the Wunderwaffe also sets the stage for what is to come in Treyarch's near perfect track record of well-designed power weapons. And I mean, seriously, just look at this thing. It's really a work of art. But still, with all that said, with only this one single addition, much is still to be desired in terms of arming the player. Numa also sees some other nice additions, which work towards making it a more complete map. While lacking a power switch, the map sees a more advanced progression system, again with 4 unique huts, each home to one of the original 4 perks. While the perks may be the same as last time, their random spawns do help to add to the overall replayability of the map. Each game is now objectively different, and that is a nice feature despite small. And lastly, of notable features, we see the addition of the first ever round boss, Hellhounds. With instant spawns and vastly increased speed, the Devil's Dogs add a new, exciting, and much needed zest to the map, if you will. Instead of the endless zombies rounds, it splits them up into chunks of 5 and throws the player off every once in a while. While most times the map feels to be lacking any sort of fear or suspense, Hellhounds add a nice moment of tension. Sadly though, this is where Numa runs out of good things to stand on. In a lot of other ways, the map simply feels bland, and after playing it for a long time, will become boring. This is most evidently seen due to the difficulty. While Verrückt and Nacht are quite challenging maps in their own rights, Numa goes the complete opposite direction and may very well be the easiest solo zombies map of all time. With a 24 zombie per round limit, guaranteed ammo refills every 4 to 6 rounds, and an infinite damage Wunderwaffe, the map difficulty caps at round 20, never becoming any more challenging or time consuming. The highest ever recorded round on this map is 9,072, and even average players can see little challenge in getting to round 50, 100s, and upwards of that. So while attempting the occasional easy mode high round attempt can be extremely satisfying, the map's lack of challenge quickly becomes stale and uninteresting. Furthermore, things are not much better on the co-op side. It seems the intended way to play this map with a team would have been to have 4 players camp in one of the huts using the electric traps as needed. While this can be an interesting challenge, even at the inception of this map, players quickly realized that with one teammate training around the comm room boardwalk, this would significantly lighten the load for the other 3, making high rounds much more attainable. And this would actually go on to become the main strategy of the map. The problem with this, however, is that it again makes the map ridiculously easy. And this strategy is so effective, it almost makes the efforts of the 3 other camping players completely negligible. Even if those 3 other players die, if the round is left up to a solid player to clutch it, they will have no problem whatsoever, and really the rounds can continue on indefinitely. This means that if you have 3 horrible players and 1 person with a shred of ability, the map becomes a complete bore, and most players will lose interest after a few games. Like Verrucht, Numa also feels like it is lacking identity. In the sense of Numa, it's a little bit different than Verrucht. See, usually a map will have some sort of distinct feature or description that players can remember it by. Verrucht has the fountain and even the fear, but its primitive state is what held it back from being admired and remembered by the community. Many of the great maps, though, are easily identifiable to even the most casual players. Der Riese is the one with the catwalk, Origins is the one with the robots, Der Eisendrache is the one with the bows, Kinder Toten is that overrated one. Wait, what? Who put that in there? Anyways, Numa, however, is flat and challenging to adequately describe in a way that makes it memorable. The best way to describe it might be, it's the map with the spinning wheel of death, also known as the flogger, or it's the one with the lightning gun, but even that might confuse the players with Der Riese. There's just no interesting landmarks, places, or really things that matter at all. Even some of those small things which attempted to add luster to the map, like the zipline, are completely uninteresting and useless. The entire map just feels like one giant bland patch of jungle with zero contrast to make it interesting. Even Verrucht has the power room to provide a bit of contrast. Sadly, on Numa, everything is just green, brown, or plain old boring. And it's sad because even the characters do not provide enough to make this map stand out. While the original 4 are one of the most redeeming qualities of this map, they still feel a little unrefined. More than that, their quotes don't yet completely work with the gameplay. With hindsight, it's very clear what the team was building towards, but it's just not yet fine-tuned in this map. While their words are meant to empower the player, it's not always the case that you feel strong on this map. With perks returning and the addition of a single Wonderwaff, it is still quite often that the player feels vulnerable, as though they are lacking a certain firepower, which we would see in future maps. Yes, you feel stronger, but not like the beast that you will become in future maps. So yet again, the commentary does not line up perfectly with the tone of the map. It's certainly a step up from the quotes of Verrucht, but it's not until the next map and on do we see the two come together in synergy. Numa and Verrucht sit side by side as some of the most disregarded zombie maps of all time, but for 2 very different reasons. Verrucht is a polarizing map, while Numa is neutrally boring. Many people love Verrucht, ranking it in their top 2 World at War maps, but many also hate it and rank it as their least favorite. Some are able to appreciate it, while others cannot get past its difficulty and primitive nature. Numa is a bland map. Rather than polarizing, it is simply uninteresting. It's not a map that you love or hate, but often rather simply have little feelings about. The weak atmosphere, boring location, and ease of difficulty all contribute to the disinterest that people feel towards it. It's a map that very few people invest effort into thinking about because, frankly, there's really not much to think about. That said though, Numa is one of the most important zombie maps to ever be created. It introduced unique power weapons, hellhounds, and our original crew of 4 known as Ultimus. The map took great leaps in further expanding the fundamental core of zombies gameplay by creating open locations which allowed for constant movement, ultimately developing into what we know today as training. Sadly though, the map still lacks enough content or innovation to be deemed in the eyes of the community as one of the greats. While it may have been the first map to find the zombies format, it will forever sit in the shadow of Der Riese as the map that came close to nailing it, but in the end came up short. And ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be our third episode of Zombies Retrospective complete. If you guys are new to the channel and enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. And if you are already subscribed and enjoyed the video, please leave a like. I also highly recommend checking out the first 2 episodes on Noct and Verrucht. They kind of build up to this video, so it might help to check those out as well. Anyways, thank you guys so much for all the amazing support on this series. I'm really having a lot of fun with it, and it's just amazing to see you guys really enjoying it as well. I will see you next week for the fan favorite Derice. Until then, peace out, you freaking nerds.